Welcome to our podcast show, First Name Basis, where we sit down with TribalScale employees and special guests to have an authentic conversation on a variety of tech, business, and innovation topics. My name is Betty. I'm a design strategist at TribalScale, and we have Shifra and Ahmed from the Knoweldge Society joining us today. The Knoweldge Society is an accelerator that develops ambitious young people to impact billions using emerging technologies. Today's topic is on tech for good. Shifra and Ahmed will be talking about the life-changing projects they're working on and how they're solving tough problems like curing cancer and advancing the robotic, prosthetics, and healthcare industry. Welcome to the show. So for all the listeners on air, you can type in your question in the comment section below, and we'll answer it throughout the podcast. So I'm going to start with some introductions. Shifra, Ahmed, would you like to introduce yourself, talk about what you do, what you're working on?
Awesome. So my name's Shifra. I'm an innovator at the Knoweldge Society, and I'm super interested in brain-computer interfaces. So all that does is they take your brain data, and it allows you to do stuff with it. And I think it's a super cool industry that's going to impact millions.
Okay, great. My name is Ahmed. I'm 16. I'm also part of the Knoweldge Society, and I'm really into like the whole field of genetic editing and like synthetic biology. So like to cure disease, to prevent disease, and like make humans better overall.
Cool. So my first question is going to be for you, Shifra. What are brain-machine interfaces, and what are the applications of this?
So brain-machine interfaces, it's literally just like a communication channel between a brain and an external device. It's super easy, and then you can do all sorts of like crazy stuff with it. So currently how they're being used is like for prosthetics and stuff, allowing people to regain control over their bodies. But I think the cooler applications are like brain-to-brain communication. I think that's super fascinating. Or even stuff like potentially downloading your consciousness. And what's really interesting is that there's a bunch of really big companies in this space right now that are kind of in a race to make sure that you have a brain chip in your brain in the next 40 years, which I think is really cool. And I think that pretty much covers about it. You can literally do anything with the technology you want as long as it continues to progress exponentially.
That sounds super futuristic. And for you, the question is, what is optical epigenetics?
Okay, so a field of like genetic editing is epigenetics, which is like what genes are turned on and off, right? And basically optical epigenetics is using these proteins that like are light sensitive and then using them to control genes using light. So it's kind of like flipping a gene on and off, and you can use that to treat like different diseases like cancer, because there's a lot of disease that happen because of like these epigenetic traits. So I find that really cool because it's non-invasive. It doesn't have any bad effects on the person. So yeah.
So is that a project that you're working on, or tell us about a project that you're working on?
It's kind of like I'm designing ways to do that. So there's like different parts of the system that would do that. So you need something to like target it. So you'd use a specific protein for that. You need something to actually have the effect of like silencing the gene. You need something for that. And the third part's like the light reactive part. So how do you actually design a system that turns on and off when exposed to specific wavelengths of light? And when you put all these parts together, you can have this treatment of like turning on genes off.
What do you imagine to be the significance of such a project?
I feel like all the testing right now is being done only on like in cells, in petri dishes, but having it like looking into the future when you can apply this to a human, you could treat I specifically looked at skin cancer because it's easier to look at in like the skin because light doesn't penetrate that far. But then if you're also looking at like ways to push it deeper into the body, so like UV light for example can go deeper, what if you could treat like tumors inside the body without ever like making an incision to remove it? And then even when you reverse that process, when you want to turn genes on, you could have like light that makes wounds heal faster, which would be crazy, right? Like imagine it's like you get a cut, you just shine a light on it and it just heals, right?
That's way better than cutting into your skin in my opinion.
Yeah.
So genome or genetic editing technology like CRISPR has been criticized for moral and ethical implications. What are your opinions about this?
Honestly, I feel like there's a lot of misconception with where gene editing is now and what people see it to be. because everybody's talking about like these designer babies, but we really don't have the technology to do that yet, because you have to consider there's a lot of traits that have multiple genes controlling them in a way that we don't really understand. Like height is controlled by 400 genes. So you can't just edit a baby and be like, oh, I want him to be 5'6", because there's no gene coding for somebody to be 5'6", right? And then even the scientist in China a few months ago, he gene edited a baby to be resistant to HIV. And that's really, like, people say, oh, it's the future of designer babies, but all he did was edit a single gene. We don't even know if it was successful or not, because the guy disappeared. The Chinese government did something with him, maybe put him in a better lab. And essentially, it's not really the future that everybody's seeing of like, oh, genetic editing is so evil. But then even from like the ethical point of view, where people are like, oh, you're creating a whole new species. We've been doing that for a really long time with selective breeding, whether it's plants or animals, because you have like, oh, what's the best trait that I want? It's been going on with like humans who like choose who to breed with, and even plants. So we want plants that can survive better weather, stuff like that. And instead of looking at genetic editing at this tool to hurt people, think of it as like making people more adaptable. Like Darwin said, it's survival of the most adaptable, and that's just another tool for us to be able to adapt better to our environment.
Interesting. So I guess I can't genetically make an awesome baby for our next generation.
Not yet.
What inspires you to pursue the projects you're working on?
So I think just the field that I'm currently pursuing, it's just super interesting, and I think it has so much potential, and that's really what excites me, because there's some concepts that just aren't being explored, and that's one thing that excites me, but it's also just the potential that it has to better human lives. I think that's a really big thing. I also think that we're going to be treading into a sort of realm that we've never explored before with like brains and stuff, which is going to be super interesting. And my brain can't even begin to conceive what that's going to look like. So it's kind of cynical almost in a way, but I'm just super excited to see where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm really passionate about. But another thing is just our community at TKS. Mm-hmm. It's like you're constantly surrounded by people that are doing such cool stuff, and just working on some really, really big problems, and just being in that environment constantly, like you just learn how to step your game up. Like you're like, if I'm not doing something really, really cool right now, I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. And I think the last thing I want to say is just constant growth. I think like a metric that we use is that every week you should be able to look back on yourself and be like, shoot, I was so stupid, because that means you've grown. And that's something I just think thinking of myself as on a positive upwards trajectory is something that is like going to continue to push me to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And like adding on to what Shifra said, it's all about like reaching like this ultimate goal. Like everybody wants to be successful, right? And the way society is right now, we define success with the things like money and stuff like that. But really, if there's a person who sees success as sitting home playing video games every day and that brings them like happiness, then they're free to do that. But in my sense, like I grew up with a family who were all doctors and helping people, and that was kind of something that stuck with me. So looking at like what can impact the most people, I feel like genetic editing is like really big, because healthcare affects everybody, and you also have to think about like the exponential impact. You're not only helping the people right now, even after like I die, because everybody dies, even if there's like longevity research, even after I die, my impact is like with every generation of kids, you're going to see like exponential impact. And for me, it's like helping the most amount of people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. It's kind of like a good mix of curiosity and experimentation that brings it. So we constantly hear about global issues like poverty, health issues, climate change, and political unrest in the news and media. What technologies do you think will play a big role in helping us solve or minimize the negative impacts of these issues?
I think for me, what really excites me, and I really want to look into it, but it's more like the technical side now, but I was batteries using nanotechnology, because like if you think about it, batteries really affect literally every single thing. Like mainly you say like solar power, because like climate change is a really big problem, even though like there's people saying, oh, there's no climate change, but like there is climate change, and it's scientifically proven. And the whole idea to use batteries that are better and more efficient, you can like now see an expansion of using solar power, because yes, solar power is very inefficient and it wouldn't be realistic right now, but if we can have these like better batteries, you can store the energy, and then you have to consider where that can apply. So like a lot of times in poverty, in countries, third world countries, they don't have access to electricity and things like that. And by having these better batteries, you can essentially provide them with that, and then provide them with internet and all these tools that make countries grow and can help grow infrastructure and things as such to make the whole world equal in that sense. And then what really excites me, and what might not excite a lot of people, is space, because I really, really like space. And like, I'm hoping to go to Mars one day, you know? So like, having that technology which allows us to make space travel safer for the astronauts, and like we can go further, and yeah, I find that like super cool.
Yeah. I think we talk about these things and you kind of talk about it as if it's like really far away, but I actually feel like it can happen very soon. People are making batteries smaller and last longer, and space exploration is happening, and it's just like, it's kind of in near reach, which is scary and interesting at the same time. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Shifra?
Yeah, so I think what excites me about the future right now is like wireless electricity, kind of along the same line as you, Ahmed. I think what keeps people stuck in a cycle of poverty is oftentimes like inability to access electricity. And I think wireless electricity is just going to be super big in different parts of the world, especially developing countries, and I can't wait to see how that's going to go. And in terms of health, I think optogenetics is going to be super big. So that's what Ahmed does more like research into, but I think optogenetics is just using light to control different like parts of your body or different cells or different neurons. And I think it's just gonna revolutionize like the medical industry, because it's gonna make everything so much more accurate. And I think that's super exciting, because I just think that the healthcare industry is so inefficient right now, and all these processes are super inefficient, and the fact that it's something that I can actually tangibly work in right now is also super cool.
Yeah.
And like, adding on to that, actually, you see like a big part that people forget about with like innovation is accessibility. Like you have all these like cool new drugs coming out. Like they found a cure for like 2 types of cancer, but a treatment costs like $400,000. Tell me who's gonna be able to afford to pay that in a lot of different countries, right? And people tend to forget like, oh, we found a cure for cancer, but only the top 1% can afford it.
Yeah.
And it's not really a cure. And like, an important part to like doing anything with healthcare is finding a way not only to make it like efficient, but also accessible and affordable to a big number of people.
That's super true, because I had a conversation with Ash. So he was the former CTO of Yahoo yesterday, and someone asked him a question about balancing like profit with just social good in terms of like running a business or having an impact. And his answer was like, you're not obligated to look after people and make sure that everything you're doing is for good, but it's awesome if you can. And I think because I plan on being like in the innovation field or whatever, I think personally, I would say it only makes sense for me to just think about the people constantly. I think the biggest part of the innovation, like the field of innovation and all these like cool exponential technologies is who it's impacting. And if someone's gonna be like disproportionately or negatively impacted by it, then I don't even know if it's something I want to do. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I think at the end of the day, these conversations, like I can have an opinion on it, but it wouldn't actually matter if I can't do anything in the field. Like someone else who has a lot more power and is morally corrupt or whatever, like would have a drastically different opinion on all these technologies, or how we can treat like some of the problems that we identified here, but they have the power so they can do whatever they want. So I think a better like mental model or a better like mental frame is to, how can I get to that point where I can affect all these people, and how can I make sure that I don't just have an opinion, but I can actually like make sure that opinion is like positively impacting people.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that you guys aren't looking at this like new technology and just thinking about that. You're really thinking about the larger impact of what you're making, and exactly where this could be going, because it could be good for good, it could be for bad, and sometimes you don't mean it to go a certain way, but it's really good that you kind of think about how people also take it on. So my last question would be, I guess some of the audience for you as well, something you may not know is that you're both still in high school, and all the students actually from the Knoweldge Society have very impressive resumes for sure. But we're curious to know how you're able to balance your time between school, the Knoweldge Society, your projects, and a social life.
so much to say. First of all, like, I'm super blessed to be in TKS, which, like, obviously I'm in TKS, so I'm gonna be like, I love TKS, but it's just such an amazing community to be in, and I can't even begin to express, like, how much I've learned, like, how much I learn every single week. It's literally just insane. But I think for me, the biggest thing has just been experimenting with my schedule. And this doesn't work out for everyone, but there was this one point in time where I was just sleeping at, like, I don't know, like 7, and then waking up at 3 in the morning and optimizing my day around it. And I just, like, kept changing it until something worked. And now I know what schedule works the best for me. And obviously it's hard because our world isn't optimized for, like, a 7 to 3 sleeping schedule, but hey, like, I tried my best. And then another thing is just mental models and learning from the best. I think TKS equips you, and the community just, like, equips you to be able to learn whatever you're learning from the best of the best. Mm-hmm. So we focus a lot on philosophy, and I think that's so helpful because now I have, like, mental models, now I can make better decisions. So someone I really look up to is Naval Ravikant, and he's just, I listened to, like, one podcast, the Knowledge Project, I think, and it was just one podcast. It was literally an hour of my life, and it completely changed my entire outlook to everything. Because he was like, if you're brushing your teeth in the morning and you're thinking about, like, anything else but you brushing your teeth in that moment, then you're doing something wrong. Because you should be present, and you should be, like, able to be content and happy with everything you're doing. And I think that, coupled with stoicism, which is, like, I can only control what I can control, and there's no use in, like, dwelling over what I can't. When you, like, bring those two together, it's so powerful because you realize that there's always some way for you to make your situation better. So why don't you just focus on it? Which sounds, like, really, like, abstract and stuff. For me, I'm in grade 10, I'm pre-IB, decided to drop IB, and that was a very interesting decision because I go to a very academically inclined school. And that was, like, it sounds like it's such a big deal in high school, but it's just putting things into perspective. Me dropping, like, a certain high school course isn't going to completely change the trajectory of my life. Like, I will be so fine in life regardless of what happens in that, like, one given month. And just being able to have, like, people like Ahmed keep me accountable, or, like, the entire TKS community remind me that, Shifra, this is not the optimal way for you to think about this. It keeps you, like, in check and balance. Yeah. And also TKS, like, kind of encompasses my social life and my academics and, like, everything. So I don't find it too bad, but yeah, it's awesome.
We have this thing where, like, she has, like, her list of tasks, and if she doesn't deliver on time,
I'll get you bubble tea.
She has to buy me bubble tea, and then it goes the other way too. So, like, I don't want to spend money on her, so I better finish my task.
Yeah.
It's good motivation. Community is definitely key.
Yeah. I guess for me, in terms of, like, balancing my time, self-understanding I feel like is really big too. And kind of what resonated with me was stoicism, what she said. Like, Marcus Aurelius was, like, this general back in the day, and he wrote, like, this really good book called Meditations, right? And he talks a lot about, like, being in the present and also, like, understanding yourself. So I actually started, like, doing more meditation. So, like, there's, like, these apps, and it doesn't have to be long, like 5 minutes, and really think about, like, why you feel a certain way, or in the other sense, like, what you really want. So, like, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I felt bad today because of this. Was it because of that? And it's kind of like this, like, feedback loop. Like,
yeah.
I'll give you an example. What is one thing you don't like eating?
Lamb.
Why?
It's really weird tasting.
Okay, so you eat lamb, you're like, oh, this lamb is really weird tasting. Okay, you eat lamb, then, like, this is unpleasant. Why is this unpleasant? Oh, because it's really weird tasting. I'm not gonna have lamb anymore, right? And people do that for, like, things like food, but they don't do it for other stuff. Like, let's say you have a conversation that you don't like, and you're like, oh, I didn't like this conversation. That usually ends there. People don't start, like, thinking, oh, why did I like this conversation? Oh, this person's really toxic. Maybe I won't talk to them again. And this idea of, like, being really present and living every day with intention just really helps you, like, get your schedule right. And then in terms of, like, school, unlike Shifra, I chose to stay in IB, and honestly, I think we've had this discussion. I think IB helps because there's this thing called, like, the 80-20 rule. Like, 20% of the work gives you 80% of the results, and then 80% of the work gives you the 100%. And what's cool about IB, and this is not a plug, but, like, IB has this thing called conversions where you get, like, these, like, 80s and you can convert up to, like, 97s. So right now I'm very happy with, like, the way I'm putting in 20% of the work and finding time for TKS while maintaining these high marks, because I feel like that's good for me because like school doesn't really like, it never really engaged me in the sense that like it's very wide ranging. Like you don't see focuses, and everybody likes specific stuff. So like I feel like this idea is just trains people to be like Chamont, he's one of the founders of Google, he says box checkers, and I feel like that's a really cool analogy. Like if you have the highest grades in your class, you're just a really good box checker. You're not, it doesn't speak to any of your other skills because nobody can see any of your other skills. I feel like TKS kind of like brings that out in you because like you're doing presentations, you're talking with like really smart people in really smart areas. And lastly, with sort of like the community, I feel like that's really big too. In terms of school, I felt like everybody like likes their own thing, and Paul Graham has this like really cool essay on his website that's talking about like why nerds aren't popular, and I guess I would consider myself a nerd, and it's kind of like he talks about how like nerds aren't popular because you don't want to be popular, you don't really care about what like the things that bring popularity, and that kind of resonated with me. But then when you go to like TKS, you have this like community where to be a nerd is to be popular, and I find that like super cool and like super supportive and helps you like get stuff done.
I mean, I would kind of like not phrase it that way, and this is just another thing that we talk about in TKS all the time, is that in school, the way school is structured is that either you succeed or either you generally like don't. And with TKS is that everyone's doing such radically different things, and that's okay. Like Ahmed's looking into something completely different, and Ahmed loves IB. I like absolutely cannot stand IB.
So there's no like linear scale
there's
that
literally
you're measured up against each
and
other.
it's a meritocracy, so anyone who puts in the work will get results. That's what we believe. It's not like you have to do this to get this X result, because that would be really limiting, and I don't think that's a good way to think about it. But also another thing that I've learned over the last couple of months is, so Vinod Khosla, who's like this awesome guy, it's just like being ruthless and taking value. And it's just, and this doesn't, like when I say that, a lot of people think that extracting value and being a good person are mutually exclusive. Yeah, it sounds evil, like manipulate people and get value and don't care, but that's not true. It's just objectively looking at a situation, being like, how can I extract value from this without being a horrible person? And that's so valuable, because I'll be on like the subway or something and I'll just be like, oh, I don't feel too well. How can I extract value here? And that's one thing. Or we put ourselves in discomfort challenges, where like as often as we can, we're encouraged to be put into unique experiences so we can have, because you're only like 0.0000001% of what you know. Like you're super limited in your understanding of the world. And unique experiences just compound until you have just a little bit better of an understanding of the world. And that's super helpful. And I've done things over the last couple of months that I never thought I'd be able to do. I live in Milton, and I took the GO to Toronto myself once, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I've never felt so independent.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Or like, I stood in the line to the McDonald's like self-ordering thing, and it's like those small things, and they like compound over time until you're just genuinely like happy with yourself. And like you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, you know what? I may not be feeling like 7 out of 7. We do it on a scale of 7 because it's a better scale. But I'm an awesome person. And I'm surrounded by awesome people. And that's just...
What else can you ask for?
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's so cool.
And like talking about discomfort, like you could see like this whole shift in like my personality. Like when I used to go up to like order food at a restaurant, I would stumble about my words. I'd be like,
still do.
And then like you're like, you don't really like, because I don't know why that would make me nervous, but now I find it like way easier to talk to people, because like I have this idea that like you know that like if something goes wrong, there's really no problem. Like even if you like mess up like something talking with somebody, you probably won't see that person again, and even if you do, they're probably gonna forget it, right? And it's this whole idea of like, even when you fail, you take that, you learn from it, and improve. You fail again, you take that, you learn from it, and improve. And like, there's not gonna be a point where you never fail at anything. You're always gonna be failing, but that means you can, every single time you fail, you're gonna improve, and then you can see that improvement, and that's like super powerful.
And what's insane is that most people don't even think about it like that. Like, I don't even know, like most people, like they'll be like, oh, I'm socially awkward when I'm in the line ordering something, but they're not actually gonna do something to get better at it. And to me, it just makes no sense. Like, why wouldn't you? Why don't you want to be to a point where you're like comfortable with the decisions you're making? So it's not like this, like the community that we're in, like Ahmed and I, it's not like we're always talking about like brain-machine interfaces and epigenetics and all that stuff. It's like the small things. And it's just this whole mental model of all these things matter. Because they're what make you you. Like, they're little idiosyncrasies that are super, super, super important. And just being able to master all of that, like, it seems so insignificant. Or, like, it seemed really insignificant when I was like, oh, I'm gonna, like, get up and intentionally do something that I don't want to do. But now I look back on it, I'm, like, so happy that I did it. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
So wait, Betty, we'll have a challenge for you, okay? If you
Discomfort challenge.
Okay, if you stumble on your words, how about
you buy us bubble tea?
Okay, do you go on the subway?
Text me on the Instagram.
Do you go on the subway?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, whenever you're taking any form of public transportation, or like when waiting in a restaurant, just like start a conversation with somebody you're in. Like, how's your day? And try to keep that conversation.
Or sing a Disney song. We've done that before. Just get up and sing a Disney.
But
that's not high upsides.
I think it's actually easier when you're not in your comfort zone. Like when I'm in Toronto, I don't do that. If I'm traveling, I tend to like turn to the person next to me, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Or something. Because I always have this thought, like, that person will never see me again. Whatever, right?
I should do that.
Yeah, but
you could do that.
I will try it.
We'll keep each other accountable.
Yeah,
I'll do it too.
Accountable.
Yeah,
to be part of the community. But I definitely learned a lot from you guys just from like half an hour. But thank you for joining our First Name Basis podcast show. To learn more about us, visit our website at TribalScale.com. And to learn more about the Knoweldge Society, you can visit them at theksociety.com. And that's a wrap.
Woohoo! Thank you for having us.